You've already met Dr. Jim Harding, and he is going to facilitate us through the next session of bringing our wise words to the table.
So I'll ask you to think about the time. At the same time, let's do this well. And I'd ask if one reporter from a workshop has already heard from an earlier workshop similar suggestions to defer or to take that out of their report and shorten their report. I think this might work. If people listen to each other, we may see this taking shape without having to do the 15 like yesterday. This is more, in some ways, is more complicated today to get a synthesis, so we will have to listen and pick our words and be time conscious. Again, 15 workshops, 30 presenters, and I'm going to do this because the synthesis, that we've got to get statements that get down under quite a range of stuff, okay? Nuclear power, accidents, safety, the weapons connection, nuclear testing, depleted uranium, abolition of nuclear weapons, disarmament, military decommissioning, nuclear waste, nuclear medicine, nuclear phase-out, climate change and nuclear power, non-nuclear energy alternatives, the paradigm shift, okay? Plus, there's been a lot of kind of dancing around geopolitics here, but we really haven't done an analysis of conflict zones and geopolitics. And I guess I would personally say we need to build those resources into this global movement. Those who study conflict, so we get our geopolitics a little more freshly updated and have a handle on it. Clearly, we're part of it with uranium contracts to India and Pakistan not joining the Saudi Arabia alliance against Yemen. I mean, just think about the dynamics. We're not going to be able to do that today, but we've been from Hiroshima to Fukushima and accidents in the US and the Ukraine, France, Australia, Canada. We're at the center of the start of the arms race, right here in this country. So we've taken quite a journey in this short period today. So like yesterday, we'll go through them. Please be brief. If you hear that someone said what you want to be said, defer and shorten. We have two objectives. We want to create a synthesis that people walk away with and they are happy about, which means we have to listen to people from all of the other workshops. And clearly that we want to translate in some way into the declaration. So let's start with that first workshop from the morning. Impacts of Fukushima. Who is reporting? And if there's no one, we'll just move on. Things tend to come back. The second one, nuclear power and health. Great.
Hi, is this on? I'm Kathy Vakil. I was one of the presenters. So we have three recommendations. The first is that all regulators should require the gaseous releases, that is the emissions, the ongoing emissions from nuclear power plants to be published on their websites, especially during refueling. Secondly, all regulators should recognize the compelling epidemiological evidence about childhood leukemia increases near power plants. And thirdly, all pregnant women and those with young families that live within 10 kilometers of nuclear facilities should be advised to relocate.
Relocation. Fantastic, and you're really a good model for others to follow. Number 3 on the climate change, who's reporting? These are workshops D, number 3.
I was one of the presenters, Angela Bischoff, Clean Air Alliance, and the whole discussion was wrapped around the potential to replace Ontario nuclear rebuilds with water power from Quebec and other green energy options. So I think the recommendation would be that coming out of this conference, we support the opportunities afforded by Quebec's surplus water power to allow Ontario to forego the rebuild of our nuclear reactors.
And put that in the context of the commission that's going to report on whether or not to go into uranium mining.
Yes.
That would be parallel. Well, that's great. I'm going to just keep going. Number 4, medical radioisotopes.
Well, I was a facilitator for that. It will be a very short summary. We heard about new techniques, scientific techniques to produce radioisotopes for research, for diagnosis, medical diagnosis, mainly cancer, which don't use nuclear reactors as they used before. They produce it by in particle accelerators, synchrotrons. And the feeling of this workshop was we get huge medical benefits with a few dollars of investments with these new techniques. I don't know if any of the presenters want to add anything. Yeah?
No, that's good. And that'll be a statement, I assume. That'll come in the declaration. Number 5, similar, but
Hello, I was a presenter, Dr. Dewar. I was not we didn't have very many people in the room, so we didn't go a long ways. And we were talking about ionizing radiation in health and recognizing that medical isotopes can cause cancer themselves, and that X-rays and the medical techniques of investigation can cause cancer, and that the radioisotopes used in health decay to form other radioisotopes that add to our worldwide radioactive background.
second largest source, apparently. Well, I can't believe this. I think we should have a coffee break. Or why don't we forget about the other 10 workshops and just go over to the film festival? No, my grandmother said, save it. Okay, the Beyond Nuclear, which was one I was in and was quite exciting, who is reporting, that's number 1 under workshops E. Really? Come on. No one? I'll take a quick run at it. The shift from seeing energy as something you forecast and you make more efficient and you deliver, to seeing services to meet human needs with new technologies and efficiencies resulting, including obviously building design and housing design, et cetera, is already happening. It does challenge us to think differently around the politics of energy and environment. If anybody wants to add. So Chernobyl and 3 Mile Islands, then the second. Yes, do it, Mike.
Yeah, Michael Schneider. I think just the fundamental thing which I was trying to convey was to say that we need to completely, entirely rethink energy from a service angle. So what we need is to cover the needs, to identify the needs and cover the needs in energy services. And what I mean by that are 6 categories of energy services. And you can place basically your entire life into these 6 categories. That is cooked food, that is heating and cooling, that is lighting, communication, mobility, and motor torque or motor force. Motor torque. So if you think about your life, you can, basically everything that has to do with energy, you can classify somewhere in there. And what we need to do is not to generate or save electricity or fuel or gas. The point is that we have to look how we intelligently can cover those needs. And people that think that because they have a plug at home, they have energy services from electricity, they're wrong. If you can't pay for the bills that this generates, you don't have the service. So it's not about electrification or, you know, getting that kind of connection to people. It's about, you know, covering their needs, essential needs, from food to motor force. Thank you.
Great. And it's worth going to his site to get some of the policy frameworks. They're quite helpful. So Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island? Yes.
I presented the Chernobyl question. I have 3 points to make. First, acknowledge the suffering of the Chernobyl victims, the population, and the 800,000 liquidators who already died or who will die early. Second, the catastrophe motivated the scientific community to do research on low radiation risk, to abandon the 100 millisievert concept. These people are our guinea pigs. Third, I would be very happy if you could include a quotation of my Belarusian friend. She said, "We are not living after Chernobyl, we are living with Chernobyl." And somebody added, "We will always live with Chernobyl." So Arnie, is he around here? He had the 3 Mile Island. Okay, he's not here. I'm sorry, I didn't prepare for that.
Okay, no, that's...
No, but Fukushima is somebody else.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
is it okay?
If someone from 3 Mile wants to come back, that's fine. The risky business on the nuclear waste?
Yes, shortly. Recognizing that in the world there is no long-term solution for nuclear waste disposal, first we should stop producing nuclear waste because there are no solutions as waste continues to be generated, and considering that the freshest fuel waste being the most radioactive. We should focus research and technical efforts on increasing safety of irradiated fuel at reactor sites, removing it from pools and improving dry casks. And finally, provide communities who are hosts, reactor communities, with tools and supports to empower them to effectively critique and respond to plans and proposals for management of nuclear waste.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's perfect. Okay, back to from Fukushima to France. Is there someone from that workshop?
So first, radiation is invisible, but anytime we check radiation in the environment of a nuclear facility, uranium mine, a conversion plant, a nuclear plant, a place where a nuclear catastrophe occurred like Chernobyl, Fukushima, we monitor radiation. And we discover that the official monitoring done by either the governments or the industry is not accurate. So what is important is to promote the ability of the citizens to monitor radiation themselves and to have training so that they can really understand what is radiation and to empower them. It's exactly what was said by our friend a few minutes ago. Another point is to say that there are many lies regarding the impact of the nuclear industry, and it would be important to have a law, either at national or international level, so that if somebody is lying about the impact of a nuclear facility, it can be condemned. So it's something which is in the law, because we have to prevent those lies which are ongoing and ongoing for decades.
Okay, great. And that dovetails with the freeing of the World Health Organization from the IAEA. Phase out of uranium mining and nuclear power.
Phase out nuclear power, you don't need uranium mining. I rest my case. No. The how is the three pillars of resistance through direct action, lobbying, and legal action that is built on consensus building locally, nationally, and internationally, that is based on consistency, efficiency, and the clarity. And at this, ultimately, if we do a good job, we'll phase them out, but we'll also get a nuclear-free future award, which is something that the Europeans have developed, and I never heard about, but it might be an incentive. Another incentive is to meet right after these meetings and build on these premises with a group at 3 o'clock to work locally and internationally to end uranium mining.
Okay, let's move to the dual technology. Sorry, go ahead.
There were just a couple of other pieces that we wanted to draw attention to, and these maybe apply to all the campaigns. And one was to be very aware of both the necessity to have things in the language of the people who are affected, and also to understand the cultural differences, because oftentimes in rooms like this we compose great plans and campaigns and ideas, but we don't understand how the cultures really operate where we want to affect the campaigns. And the third thing is just on a personal note that I think it would be wonderful if we do this again to have a component that really talks about the wildlife, the domestic animals, about nature, about
Wildlife.
you know that it's not just human beings who are hurt by the nuclear fuel chain, and we tend to only think about ourselves. And when we see the pictures from Fukushima of the cows crying and the dogs lost in the street, and we know what's happened to the wildlife around Chernobyl, and obviously with an atomic bomb everything is obliterated instantaneously, the suffering of the animals that were used for the atomic tests, those things must, will restore our humanity if we remember to talk about lives beyond just human beings.
Mm-hmm. That'll have to find its way in the statement. So the dual technology session that was here?
Yes, we talked about how the nuclear power and nuclear weapons are two sides of the same coin, and that we need to oppose both. We talked about supporting the ICAN movement as a growing and strong effort to get rid of nuclear weapons. We talked about nuclear power plants as being, in essence, pre-deployed nuclear weapons. And also we talked about, at the UN, addressing nuclear issues from the perspective of human rights. And to do this as a way to avoid being, having our concerns being addressed, being directed towards the agencies which are so friendly towards the nuclear industry.
Okay.
Frank Bolton, the other presenter. I just wanted to, in my presentation, emphasize the cynicism of the nuclear supplying nations who are giving the, selling the atomic assistance or the nuclear technology to new countries. Their motive in doing that is purely self-centered. It's for their own countries, it's for their own economies. And they know there's a risk that the receiving nation will sooner or later try to develop its peaceful atom into a warlike atom. And this is inevitable. It's a real risk. There is no way of preventing this. The IAEA is useless, underfunded, and at a complete, is not just irrelevant, but it's conflicted in what its duties are. So consequently, it is inevitable that sooner or later, while we have nuclear so-called peaceful programs, nuclear weapon proliferation is risking. And given the state of the world and its deteriorating security status, unless we get rid of nuclear weapons, and that means getting rid of nuclear power, there is always a risk that they will be used.
Okay, thank you. On the military site contamination, Hanford? No, I know. That's why. Somebody reporting from the Hanford and Australian weapons testing?
I was involved in that
Okay.
enlightening workshop that the tragedy of Hanford's environmental toxicity, for those of you who don't know, the millions of gallons that are leaking into the Columbia River is just one of the so-called legacy sites, areas post bomb production, and the recommendations are that the $1 trillion modernization funds needs to be clearly earmarked for the clearance of these areas into perpetuity. They're already spending billions of dollars, and this has to be made clear for all of the sites, not only Hanford, and that this should be something that's very accountable and represent a clear timeline for future generations to understand that this environmental hazard has to be dealt with. The DU Weapons workshop was a plea for a recommendation that US and Canada vote to ban DU weapons, as they have abstained at each of the United Nations discussions on the topic, and that everybody in this room should be aware that the Ban DU Weapons campaign is an international campaign and needs your support. And they have a great website, and they need your support financially and every other way. Thank you.
And it just receives official status yesterday.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to add to that, just a message to Canadian and Australian campaigners. I know there's some of you in here. Your countries are enablers. They are abstaining on our resolutions on depleted uranium weapons at the UN. We have 150 plus countries who are supporting them. Canada and Australia consistently abstain. And we need your help to try and change that. So bandepleteduranium.org, get in touch, because we could really do with some help in Australia and Canada, and in fact anywhere else. Nice one.
Great. So let's move on. Hiroshima, Australia, impacts of nuclear weapons. Someone from that?
Hello, Jim. I was one of the presenters there. We spoke of the emotional and the real human impacts of the industry, and I was joined by the Japanese doctor here. Personally, I think this is probably the most important area of all this, because we talk about this, we talk about that, but at the end of the day, this stuff really affects humans, hey? And my family, until family has been affected, like come up and tap them on the shoulder, people aren't really interested about talking about it, but in the little workshop there we spoke about the real human impacts, and that really needs to be told in any way possible. That's what I'm about, really, yeah. So Andy, I'd like you to get me over to South Africa for the next symposium, because that story is most important and it needs to be told and out there. It's paramount that needs to be told. I think the very human impact that this has, and intergenerational impact. I mean, my grandmother was the person who was under the bombs and stuff, and it would be irresponsible of me not to be acting now, because it's done full circle, and now they're digging it up right on our doorstep of my ancestral lands. So it needs to be heard, the human impact, okay? It does kill people.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'd like to add one thing, that we share the common word of hibakusha. This means survivors of the airborne victims, and also the every kinds of radiation victims. So it's an international word, hibakusha. And it's a spirit, the strong spirit to stop all nuclear disaster. That is another thing. And you skipped the workshop D number 2, and I was one of the presentator over there. And I just want to say one message from that workshop, and it's let's work together to move towards the end of the nuclear age from Fukushima. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first one on abolition of nuclear weapons. Who is?
I just realized we have translation or no? We do, we don't? No. I'll say it in French. Try to translate it in. No? Well, I'll say it in French and English then, okay? So, first thing, soutenir le mouvement qui.
To support the movement to ban nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons declared illegal. Demander au Canada de souscrire à l'engagement de l'Autriche qui vise à rendre illégales les armes nucléaires. So, have Canada joins the Austrian government that wants to have illegal, that wants to get nuclear weapons illegal. Favoriser l'ouverture de négociations pour combler le vide juridique actuel au niveau de l'interdiction et l'élimination des armes nucléaires. This one, I'll leave it if somebody wants to translate it. No, okay. They're not translating? Okay.
The presenter was translating himself, so...
Les îles Marshall qui poursuivent actuellement la Cour internationale.
Support the Marshall Islands, which are now...
Islands that have a legal suit actually at the La Haye International Court of Justice against the 9 countries who have nuclear weapons. And the last one was concerns depleted uranium, it has been said. So that's about it. Understood? Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
Great. And then the second one on abolition.
This was a very prolific workshop, and I actually have 8 here, so I will hand them to you afterwards. Basically, first one, that all Canadian uranium exports be banned. There was a slightly weaker version of that put forward by Gordon Edwards, and he can give you the exact wording there. Whereas Canada is a signatory of NPT, must not export to any country which maintains a nuclear arsenal. So there are kind of 2 versions of that same one. Another one, that the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission should uphold Canada's NPT provisions in regards to tritium calling it a controlled substance, not being produced or exported. One on NATO, get rid of NATO's tactical nuclear weapons deployed on the soil of 5 NATO states. I guess there are about 100 to 400 of those. Encourage NATO allies to reject their reliance on nuclear weapons and NATO's strategic concept. Another one, decommission nuclear reactors by calling on the regulatory bodies. This was given by someone from Vermont, the States, to actively do its regulatory job and actually protect the public. One on ICANN, noting the impossibility of an adequate response to a nuclear catastrophe, a call on immediate commencement of negotiations for a nuclear weapons ban, support the Austrian pledge to fill a legal gap on the prohibition and elimination of these weapons, call on all state parties to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to fulfill the obligation to disarm under Article 6. And one last one, resolve that the deadly overlap between atomic bombs and nuclear power reactors, having been confirmed yet at Chernobyl and Fukushima, we now call for the abolition of all commercial reactors. Is that right? Okay.
Okay, great. So that's it. Discussion to follow after pictures. One appeal, 2 appeals. Someone has removed the only copy of the 1988 Uranium Congress in Saskatoon. It was just a copy to look at. It's disappeared if someone has it. Secondly, how many people here were at Salzburg? Okay, we would like a picture of the Salzburg people, which could maybe be taken at the same time or as we go to the legislature for the large one, and then try to figure out why there's so few. Like, is Europe boycotting North America and Australia because we still haven't got it? Just kidding. Salzburg. So thank you very much. I don't know whether you're tired, but yesterday you were way more feisty.
Sorry.
We're just about to close. Frank, did you have a comment?
Just to add that in our particular workshop, and also mentioned elsewhere, there was a real encouragement for a recognition of the role of women. It's not just improving the human aspect, but the leadership of women as a real force in promoting the ban on nuclear mining and on weapons.